Samuel Little was born on June 7, 1940, in Georgia. His childhood was marked by poverty and constant relocation. His mother earned money doing odd jobs, and he hardly knew his father. From an early age, Little exhibited aggressive behavior and broke the law, committing thefts and getting into trouble with the police. As an adult, he continued his criminal lifestyle, traveling across the United States and living off odd jobs. Behind his outward instability lay a terrible secret. From the 1970s to the 2000s, Little committed a series of murders of women, remaining unpunished for a long time. His victims were often socially vulnerable people, whose disappearances rarely attracted the attention of investigators. Due to the lack of witnesses and evidence, many crimes remained unsolved. In 2012, he was arrested in California for theft, and DNA analysis unexpectedly linked him to 3 unsolved cases from the 1980s. In 2014, Little was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison.
While in prison, he began to recount his crimes in detail. FBI agents and Texas Ranger James Holland documented his confessions, including astonishingly accurate details, dates, locations, and descriptions of people he remembered even decades later. The FBI recognized Samuel Little as the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history. He confessed to 93 murders, of which more than 50 have been officially confirmed. According to investigators, many of his victims remained unidentified for a long time, and it was thanks to his confessions that their identities were restored. Samuel Little died on December 30th, 2020, at the age of 80. Anthony Eugene Robinson was born on September 3rd, 1986. He had a difficult childhood, moving frequently between New York, Maryland, and Virginia without stable housing. Friends described him as withdrawn and irritable, although he had no previous run-ins with the law. He worked at waste disposal companies and was an active user of dating sites. In October 2021, 54-year-old Elizabeth Redmond, who had met Robinson online, went missing. She was later found near a motel in Harrisonburg. A month later, another woman was found in the same area, 39-year-old Tanita Smith, also known to Robinson through dating apps. The police noticed the similar circumstances of the disappearances. At the same time, the cases of the disappearance of 29-year-old Cheyenne Brown and 48-year-old Stephanie Harrison were investigated. Their remains were found near the Moon Inn Hotel. The press later nicknamed the criminal the Cart Shopper Killer, based on details related to the discovery of the bodies. Cameras recorded Robinson meeting with the women shortly before their disappearance. The investigation established that Robinson used dating sites to find his victims. Analysis of his phone and DNA helped link him to several incidents. Later, forensic evidence confirmed Robinson's connection to another woman, Sonia Champ, who was found shortly before the first known crimes. The arrest took place on November 23, 2021. At the trial in January 2025, the jury found Robinson guilty of the murders of Elizabeth Redmond and Tanita Smith. He faces several life sentences without the possibility of parole. Maury Troy Travis was born on October 25, 1965, in St. Louis County, Missouri. He had a quiet childhood. He grew up in a middle-class family and did well in school, but over the years he became a withdrawn and anxious teenager. After high school, he enrolled in college but soon dropped out. In 1989, Travis was convicted of armed robbery and spent several years in prison. After his release, he worked as a waiter and lived in the suburbs of St. Louis. Outwardly, he looked normal, but inside he developed a dangerous addiction to control and power over people. In the late 1990s, Travis began meeting women on the streets and in motels, mostly those who were in difficult life situations. He invited them to his home, where he committed serious crimes. The first victims began to disappear in 2000 and 2001. In various areas of Missouri and Illinois, the bodies of women with identical signs of crime were found. Investigators realized they were dealing with a serial killer. The turning point came when the St. Louis Post-Dispatch newspaper received an anonymous letter with a map indicating the location of a new crime. Experts determined that the map had been downloaded from Maury Travis's computer. During a search of his home, police found records indicating his involvement in multiple murders. According to investigators, Travis confessed to 17 crimes, but the actual number of victims may be higher. In 2025, the FBI confirmed the identities of 3 previously unidentified women. On June 10, 2002, while in custody, Maury Travis took his own life.
Eddie Lee Mosley was born on March 31st, 1947, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, into a large, low-income family. He was the third of 10 children. From an early age, he suffered from health and mental development problems, which led to poor academic performance and early school dropout. Mosley spent his childhood in a disadvantaged neighborhood where crime and poverty were commonplace. At the age of 18, he had his first brush with the law. From the late 1970s onwards, he gained a reputation as a dangerous individual. Mosley was arrested several times for assault and theft, and spent years in prisons and psychiatric clinics. Doctors diagnosed him with serious mental disorders. But in 1979, he was declared harmless and released. Sometime later, a series of murders of women began in the area, most of which remained unsolved for a long time. According to the investigation, between 1973 and 1987, Mosley may have been involved in the deaths of at least 8 people, and possibly as many as 16. His victims were women from poor neighborhoods, often socially vulnerable. For decades, his crimes were attributed to other people, leading to a series of miscarriages of justice. 2 innocent men, Jerry Townsend and Frank Smith, were convicted of murders that DNA analysis later linked to Mosley. These cases became examples of systemic failures in the American justice system. In 1987, Mosley was arrested, but due to his severe mental condition, he was found incompetent and sent for treatment. Subsequent DNA tests confirmed his involvement in a number of crimes, but by that time he was already under medical supervision. Eddie Lee Mosley died on May 28, 2020, at the age of 73, from complications of his illness.
John Floyd Thomas Jr. was born on July 26, 1936, in Los Angeles, California. He had a difficult childhood. His mother died when he was 12, and he was raised by relatives. He did not excel in school, and after serving in the Air Force, he was discharged for disciplinary reasons. In 1957, Thomas was sent to prison for the first time for assault and theft. After his release, he led a double life for a long time. Outwardly calm and polite, he hid the dark side of his personality. In the mid-1970s, Los Angeles was rocked by a series of mysterious murders of elderly women living alone. The perpetrator operated in the same manner, which allowed the police to link the crimes together. He was dubbed the West Side Killer. Between 1972 and 1978, at least 17 women were killed. After 1978, the crime stopped, and the police assumed that the perpetrator had died or was in prison. Indeed, Thomas was in prison at the time. After his release in 1983, a new wave of similar crimes began in the Los Angeles area. Investigators gave the criminal a new nickname, the Southland Strangler, unaware that it was the same person. It was only in the early 2000s, thanks to DNA analysis, that a connection between the old cases was established. In 2009, The CUDIS database returned a match. The traces belonged to John Floyd Thomas. He was arrested in Los Angeles, where he'd been living a quiet life and working for an insurance company. In 2011, Thomas pleaded guilty to 7 counts of murder to avoid the death penalty. The court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Chester Dwayne Turner was born on November 5th, 1966, in Warren, Arkansas. After his parents divorced, he moved to Los Angeles with his mother. Turner's childhood was marked by poverty and instability. He dropped out of school and got by doing odd jobs, working as a cook and pizza delivery boy. After his mother moved, he lived on the streets and in shelters. In the 1980s and 1990s, Turner came to the attention of the police several times for theft, carjacking, and fighting. Outwardly, he seemed quiet and unremarkable, but he was leading a double life. In the late 1980s, a series of mysterious murders of women began in the southern districts of Los Angeles. The perpetrator operated in the same area, and his victims were socially vulnerable women. Between 1987 and 1998, the police linked Turner to the deaths of at least 14 women.
For many years, the crimes remained unsolved, and in some cases, innocent people were convicted under pressure. In particular, janitor David Allen Jones, who spent more than 10 years in prison until DNA analysis proved his innocence. A breakthrough in the investigation came in 2002, when Turner was serving time for another crime. His DNA matched samples found at the scenes of the old murders. In 2004, he was charged with 10 counts, and in 2007, he was sentenced to death. Later, between 2011 and 2014, 4 more confirmed cases were added. In 2020, the California Supreme Court upheld nearly all of the convictions, and in 2024, Turner was charged with a new offense related to a case in Utah. Today, Chester Dwayne Turner is serving his sentence at San Quentin Prison, remaining one of the most notorious serial killers in California history. Paul DeRusso was born on August 11, 1970, in Beaumont, Texas. He had a difficult childhood. His father left the family, and his mother moved with him to Los Angeles. School was not easy for him, but after graduating, he got a job as a security guard. In the early 1990s, he was arrested twice for possession of a firearm. In 1992, DeRusso enlisted in the U.S. Army and was sent to Germany. There he got married and later returned to the U.S., where he served at Fort Benning, Georgia. After several disciplinary violations in 1999, he was stripped of his rank and discharged. After moving with his family to Florida, DeRusso changed jobs frequently, working as a bus driver, animal control officer, and taxi driver. Outwardly, he looked like an ordinary person, but behind this mask lurked a dangerous personality. From the late 1990s to the early 2000s, Jacksonville was rocked by a series of murders of young women. All of the crimes were committed with particular cruelty, and investigators were unable to establish a connection between them for a long time. The breakthrough came in 2003, when DNA analysis linked 7 cases, including a murder in Fort Benning 6 years earlier. Witnesses reported that several victims were last seen with a taxi driver who resembled DeRusso. He was arrested on June 17, 2003. Investigators determined that he had killed at least 7 women between 1997 and 2003. In 2007, the court found him guilty and sentenced him to death. However, 10 years later, the Florida Supreme Court overturned the verdict due to a violation of jury voting procedures. In December 2021, a new trial was held, at the end of which Paul DeRusso was finally convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment without the right to parole. Anthony Edward Sowell was born on August 19, 1959, in East Cleveland, Ohio. He grew up in a large family where poverty and cruelty reigned. Sowell's childhood was spent under constant pressure, which, according to acquaintances, had a profound effect on his psyche. In 1978, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. During his 7 years of service, Sowell managed to visit Japan and received several awards. After his discharge, he returned to Cleveland and worked in a factory. However, his life soon went downhill. In 1989, he was arrested for assaulting a woman and spent 15 years in prison. Released in 2005, Sauer settled in a house on Imperial Avenue. Neighbors complained about the stench coming from the building, but he explained it away as spoiled food. No one suspected that behind the walls lay a secret that would later shock the entire country. From 2007 to 2009, women began to disappear in the Cleveland area.
In October 2009, police arrived at Sowell's house with an arrest warrant and discovered the remains of 11 victims. All of the women had been killed at different times, and many of them were listed as missing. At the time of his arrest, Sauer was 50 years old. He behaved calmly and showed no remorse. The investigation established that he had been operating for several years, inviting women to his home under various pretexts. In 2011, a trial took place that caused a huge public outcry. Sowell was found guilty on 83 counts, including 11 murders, and sentenced to death. All appeals were rejected. Anthony Sowell died on February 8, 2021, at the age of 61, in Chillicothe prison from illness, after spending nearly a decade awaiting execution. Lonnie David Franklin Jr. was born on August 30th, 1952, in South Los Angeles, California. He grew up in a poor neighborhood where violence and crime were part of everyday life. After school, Franklin joined the U.S. Army and served in Germany. In the 1970s, he was convicted of a serious crime and returned to Los Angeles after his release. His life seemed to be back on track. He got married, became a father, and found work as a car mechanic. To his neighbors, Franklin was a friendly and quiet man, but behind this mask lay a dark side. In the mid-1980s, a series of murders of women began in South Los Angeles. All the victims were from the same social circle: poor, vulnerable, often living on the streets. From 1985 to 1988, the police recorded at least 10 similar crimes. After that, Franklin seemed to disappear. The murders stopped for 14 long years. This hiatus earned him the nickname, the Grim Sleeper. In the early 2000s, the crimes resumed.
In 2007, a woman's body was found in Cleveland, and DNA analysis linked the case to a series of old murders. The investigation created a special team that used family DNA analysis to track down Franklin. The evidence matched, and on July 7, 2010, he was arrested. During a search of his home, hundreds of photographs and videos of women were found, many of whom could not be identified. In 2016, the trial took place. Franklin was found guilty of 10 murders and 1 attempted murder, after which he was sentenced to death. On March 28, 2020, Lonnie Franklin was found dead in San Quentin prison. Henry Louis Wallace was born on November 4, 1965, in Barnwell, South Carolina. He grew up without a father, under the strict supervision of his mother, who often resorted to physical punishment. Despite his difficult childhood, Wallace was an active student, participating in events and even joining the cheerleading team. After school, he briefly attended college, and in 1985, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. He married during his service, but the marriage quickly fell apart due to addiction issues. After leaving the military, Wallace returned to his hometown without a stable job. In 1990, a girl he knew disappeared in his hometown, but no charges were filed at the time. After moving to Charlotte, North Carolina, Wallace got a job as a manager at a fast food restaurant chain. There he made many acquaintances, mainly among the women he worked with. From 1992 to 1994, a series of mysterious murders began to occur in the city. All the victims were young women who were acquainted with Wallace.
The police were unable to connect the cases for a long time. It was only in March 1994 that Wallace was arrested on another suspicion, and he soon confessed to 11 murders. The investigation established that almost all of his victims were African American women who lived or worked near him. In 1996, the trial began, causing a public outcry. On January 7, 1997, Henry Wallace was found guilty of 9 murders and sentenced to death. He later apologized to the families of the victims. Since then, Wallace has remained on death row at the Raleigh prison in North Carolina, continuing to file appeals.
Dwayne Lee Harris was born in 1963 in Seattle, Washington. His childhood was marked by constant violence. From an early age, he found himself on the streets, where drugs and crime were rampant. Even as a teenager, Harris was known as a hot-tempered and unpredictable person who often got into trouble with the law. By the late 1990s, Harris was spending most of his time in the area under the I-5 and I-90 freeways, a place known as the Jungle, where homeless people and addicts lived. According to the investigation, it was there that he began killing. The first victim, a 42-year-old woman, was found in the fall of 1997. A few months later, the body of 33-year-old Antoinette Jones was found in the same area. Both murders had a similar modus operandi. The victims were strangled and their bodies left under bridges. In January 1998, police found a third woman, 25-year-old Olivia Smith, who had died as a result of an attack. After these events, Harris was arrested for robbery. While in prison, he called a detective and claimed to know who had killed the women. He later confessed to the crimes himself, explaining that he enjoyed having power over people. During the trial, Harris behaved provocatively, interrupting lawyers and laughing during the hearings. In December 1998, he was found guilty of 3 murders and sentenced to 94 years in prison. The judge noted his complete lack of remorse. In subsequent interviews, Harris claimed to have killed more than 30 people, but these statements have not been confirmed. He is currently serving his sentence at Stafford Creek Correctional Center.
Carlton Michael Gary was born on September 24th, 1950, in Columbus, Georgia. His childhood was marked by poverty and instability. His mother often left him with relatives who worked in the homes of wealthy elderly women. His father was not involved in his life. As a teenager, Gary began stealing and was sent to prison for petty crimes. In 1970, he moved to New York City, where he tried to start over, but soon became a suspect in the murders of elderly women. Despite the similarities in the crimes, it was not possible to prove his guilt at the time, and he was only sentenced for robbery. After his release, Gary continued his criminal activities. In 1977, after escaping from prison, he returned to his native Columbus. Soon, a series of murders of women living alone began in the city. The investigation established that the criminal broke into their homes and strangled his victims. 7 people died in a short period of time.
The townspeople lived in fear, and the press dubbed the unknown criminal the Columbus Strangler. In 1978, Gary was arrested in South Carolina for theft. Later, the police linked him to the murders. Fingerprints and witness testimony pointed to him. In 1986, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. From the outset, the case was accompanied by doubts. Some of the physical evidence and expert reports raised questions, and Gary's supporters claimed that the investigation had made mistakes. Nevertheless, the sentence remained in force. On March 15, 2018, more than 30 years after the trial, Carlton Michael Gary was executed in a Georgia state prison. He was 67 years old.
Carl Eugene Watts was born on November 7th, 1953, in Killiney, Texas. His father served in the Army, and his mother taught art. After his parents divorced, the boy lived with his mother and had a hard time coping with her remarriage. As a child, he suffered from meningitis, after which he became withdrawn and irritable. Later, he developed obsessive thoughts and disturbing dreams related to women. As a teenager, Watts first exhibited aggression. He attacked a woman and was sent for psychiatric treatment. Doctors warned that he was dangerous, but he was soon released. After graduating from high school, he enrolled in college but was expelled for inappropriate behavior. From that point on, he began a nomadic life between the states of Texas, Michigan, and Ohio. From 1974 to 1982, Watts committed a series of attacks on women in different cities. His victims were random passers-by, whom he attacked without any apparent motive. Investigators noted that the criminal acted swiftly, leaving no clues or witnesses. In 1982, Watts was arrested in Houston. To avoid the death penalty, he agreed to a plea bargain and confessed to a number of attacks and murders, stating that there could be more than 80 victims. He was sentenced to 60 years in prison, but due to the peculiarities of the law, he could be released early, which caused a public outcry. In 2004, after the investigation was reopened, the court found him guilty of murdering a woman in Michigan and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Carl Eugene Watts died on September 21st, 2007, at the age of 53. Investigators believe he may have been involved in more than 100 murders, one of the highest numbers in U.S. history.
Cleof Prince Jr. was born on July 24, 1967. After high school, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy, but was soon discharged after being convicted of theft. In 1989, he moved to San Diego and settled in the Buena Vista Gardens housing complex. It was there that a series of murders began, known as the Claremont murders. Neighbors described Prince as a quiet and unassuming man, but it later became clear that he had been carefully watching the women who lived nearby. He chose moments when his victims were home alone and attacked during the day to avoid witnesses. Between January and September 1990, 6 young women were murdered in San Diego. They all lived in the same neighborhood and frequently visited the same sports club that Prince frequented. The victims included 20-year-old Tiffany Schultz, 21-year-old Janine Weinhold, 18-year-old Holly Tarr, 38-year-old Alyssa Keller, and, in the last episode, 42-year-old Pamela Clark and her daughter Amber. These crimes caused real shock and panic in the city. In April 1990, the police compiled a photo fit of the suspect, but it took a year to arrest him. In February 1991, Prince attempted to break into a woman's house in the Scripps Ranch area. Witnesses remembered his car's license plate number, and he was arrested 2 days later. DNA and fingerprint analysis proved his connection to the series of murders. In 1993, the court found Prince guilty of 6 murders and sentenced him to death. All subsequent appeals were rejected, and in 2007, the California Supreme Court finally upheld the sentence. Today, Cleof Prince remains on death row at San Quentin Prison, one of the most violent killers to operate in Southern California in the late 20th century.
His childhood was marked by poverty and instability. Already in his youth, he committed assaults and thefts, and in prison, he showed a tendency toward manipulation. Psychiatrists diagnosed him with antisocial and narcissistic personality disorders. Deborah Brown, born in 1962, had mild mental retardation and a dependent personality. After meeting Coleman in 1983, she quickly fell under his influence and became completely subservient to him. Together, they became a couple united in violent crime. In the spring of 1984, they began a series of murders that spanned 6 states, from Wisconsin to Ohio. Coleman and Brown chose their victims from among acquaintances and random people, often gaining their trust before attacking. Among the victims were women and children. Their actions caused shock and panic in several U.S. cities. The FBI included Coleman on the list of America's 10 most wanted fugitives.
On July 20th, 1984, the couple was arrested in Evanston, Illinois. Weapons and belongings of their victims were found in their possession. During interrogations, they confessed to a number of murders and kidnappings. The trials took place in 3 states, and in each one, Coleman received the death penalty. He became the only criminal in U.S. history to be sentenced to death in 3 different jurisdictions. On April 26, 2002, Elton Coleman was executed in Ohio. Before his death, he read a passage from Psalm 23 and formally apologized to the families of the victims. Deborah Brown avoided execution because of her mental state. She is serving a life sentence in an Ohio prison, and years later, publicly admitted her guilt.